So we jump forward now to Act 3, Scene 2. Not to say that there aren't some interesting things in between, but let's try to focus in on some key moments. So Richard has been abroad to Ireland to fight his wars. He's heard that Bolingbroke is back in England. He's returned. We've heard already in the end of Act 2 that the soldiers that were waiting for him to support him have deserted, thinking that he's dead. They've heard rumours that he's dead. He's been late arriving. He doesn't know that yet. So at the beginning of the scene, he's usually depicted on the beach itself. He's arrived and he's full of emotion, which is typical again of Richard. But again, in this scene, we start to see the little bit of a turning point in that although we don't exactly admire him because of his petulance and his quick changing moods, we see some poetry and some emotion and some intensity about him that we haven't really seen in the rather brutal scenes we've seen of Bolingbroke's return, in particular 3-1. The previous scene he's executed without any real trial, two of Richard's followers. And we begin to see a contrast that's not quite as appealing to most modern readers, at least, although, as I say, in the past that sometimes been presented as decisive leadership. But here we see the emotional Richard. I weep for joy to stand upon my kingdom once again. But again, that my kingdom, that sense of arrogance, sense of possessiveness, and overconfidence in his own position. Again, long speeches, rather kind of, again, poetic, imaginative, which is enriching and interesting, but also perhaps not really the essence of what makes a good leader. He imagines that the sort of the weeds and the animals will stand up for him, that the whole country, the earth itself, will in some ways impede Bolingbroke's advance. Carlyle makes a speech, and there's a sort of comedy around Carlyle in that he always speaks in a rather roundabout way, and Armel has to say, he means my lord, so he has to explain it for us, because mostly when we read that speech we're not exactly sure what he meant. But basically, Armel, who's one of the most loyal people to Richard throughout the play, his cousin, York's son, reminds him that Bolingbroke's going to get stronger. We need to get on and fight, not make poetic speeches about it. And again, he makes a long speech in response to that, rather than necessarily doing anything very active. But again, he's full of optimism, and this is the rising and falling action within one scene that you can talk about, whereas often that's taken place, rising and falling action take place over many scenes in plays, tragedies. In this tragedy, we see Richard sort of enact that several times just within this scene. And here he's full of kind of optimism, talks about a glorious angel and things, that things are very much going to be on his side again, the God factor, divine right, that kind of thing, the supernatural's on his side as well as the natural. However, Salisbury appears. And he says, I'm sorry, I've got some bad news. The soldiers that you're waiting for, that you were expecting to be here, they've all left. For the Welshmen hearing thou wert dead had gone to Bolingbroke, dispersed and fled. With the rhyming couplet again conveying this idea of a sense of finality. Now, there's some sort of pause there. We don't know what exactly will be done on stage, but Armel has to step in and say, come on, why do you look so pale? And Richard then rather kind of wittily replies, I'm pale because I had 20,000 men in my blood, if you like, and they've just drained away, and that's bound to make you pale. Time hath set a blot upon my pride is a real moment of tragedy there. That is your tragic idea, that pride is the big tragic flaw that underscores nearly all the flaws in tragic heroes. And he's realised that he's now, time is catching him up. Now that does come back again at the very end of the play when it really has caught him up. At this point, he's quick to flip one thing for another, because Armel only has to have one line. Come on, remember who you are. Oh yes, I'd forgot. Am I not king? So again, that slightly over confidence comes back almost immediately. If I'm king, well, is not the king's name 20,000 names? I'm worth all these soldiers just by myself. And then again, that overconfidence. I know York has some power. He has soldiers. He will fight on my side. So it's not a problem if I've lost a few soldiers here. So he's gone from optimism and excitement and expectation to almost immediately feeling like he wants to give up. And then back to the same optimism again. Everything's going to be fine. I'm the king. Again, that belief in the idea of and the name of king being enough to convey everything, and that no one can challenge that. He's always king, whatever happens. However, Scroop then comes in with more news, and Richard again, his mood immediately flips. Scroop doesn't even get a chance to say what he has to say, really. He does say he's got a care-tuned tongue, so the suggestion that he has got bad news. And Richard immediately says, my ear is open and my heart prepared. The worst is worldly loss. What canst thou unfold? Say, is my kingdom lost? And so he's already kind of pontificating and speculating on how it will be when he loses a kingdom. He seems to give up almost immediately. We'll see that later in the play too. Scroop gives his news, and again, it seems like Bolingbroke's gaining a lot of supporters and things are going his way. Again, that sense which we got a warning of earlier, that there's a general boys with women's voices strive to speak big. But, that his power is coming from lots of people supporting him. He's able to gain support. Both young and old rebel. All goes worse than I have power to tell. So there's a sense that Bolingbroke's got the weaker, the poorer people on his side, perhaps, is implied in that. But it's working. There's a lot of people on his side, and Richard's underestimated the need to have those people on his side. And then you get this moment, which again reflects badly on Richard. He sort of says, well, where was the Earl of Wiltshire? Where's Bagot, Bushy and Green, his best mates? Have they made peace with Bolingbroke? And Scroop, not wishing, as is often the case, nobody seems to want to say directly that people have died. It's always said in euphemism through the play, which is interesting, because death is the thing that civil war causes on a large scale, and it's one of the things that Shakespeare seems to be aware of and wary of throughout his history plays, that civil war is a great disaster for ordinary everyday people, even more so really than these big figures who lose their kingships. So he says, peace they have made with him indeed, my lord, meaning they've been executed. But Richard takes it literally, or slightly surprisingly, given that he's a poet himself, really, and he knows about metaphor. And he throws a load of metaphors at them. Villains, vipers, damned without redemption, dogs easily won, snakes in my heart, Judases. Again, notice he calls them Judases. There's this sense of him as Christ there, and that appears elsewhere in the play too, that again, this hyperinflated self-image from Richard of himself as Christ. So he's very vicious that they've turned against him, and then Scroop has to say, I'm sorry, I didn't really mean that. I mean, they've had their heads cut off. And Armel has to ask him again, just say, tell us in plain language, are they dead? Yes, all of them lost their heads. And Armel's kind of still being practical. Well, where was the Duke of York at that point? My dad, did he not have anything to say about that? But Richard dismisses it and makes one of his great speeches in the play, of comfort no man speak, let us talk of graves, of worms, of epitaphs, make dust our paper, and starts to talk more poetically and metaphorically about death. But what's interesting is, although death has prompted it and the death of his friends has prompted it, he doesn't talk about his mourning for the loss of his friends or for their loss of life, but more just about death in general, and quickly flips it to he is the one who's going to die. So for God's sake, let us sit upon the ground and tell sad stories of the death of kings. And then he starts to talk about the various ways in which kings have been deposed, as if, interestingly, he suddenly realised that can happen, where he didn't seem to know that in the past. He now does seem to have remembered there's lots of stories of deposing of kings. And that confidence seems to drain completely away from him here, that it is hopeless. and that he is going to die, he is going to be deposed. So again, we've had this flipping of emotions from excitement to despair to, again, confidence, then to a kind of anger, and now to a total despair in a very long-winded and rather complex but subtle speech. But he gets one more sort of jolly up with Carlisle again, who again is one of his loyalist followers, saying, no, come on, and Armel saying, look, don't forget my dad, he can support you. So again, there's another little uptick there. Thou chidest me well, proud Bolingbroke, I come to change blows with thee for our day of doom. So again, there's a sense, no, I'm going to fight Bolingbroke, of course I am. So yet another uptick, yet another upsurge after a downfall. But then Scroop has more news and says, oh, well, York is joined with Bolingbroke, which isn't quite true. York just decided not to try and oppose him because he didn't think he had enough men. But he didn't say that I side with Bolingbroke or want him to become king. But that's how Scroop has interpreted it. And again, of course, it is enough to make Richard give up hope finally. And he talks about, cousin, you were trying to stop me being in that way of despair. What do you say now? What comfort have we now? Rhetorical question. I'll pine away. A king woe's slave shall kingly woe obey. So I'm going to be sad. And so he starts to take on this identity of self-pity, I suppose. He does me doubly wrong that wounds me with flatteries of his tongue. More flattery mentioned again, but now he rejects all those flatteries. And I suppose you've seen that throughout the scene, that people, particularly Armel and Carlisle, have flattered him and said, you can do this, but he has to face the reality that he can't, that there's no hope. And he has given up at that point. And it really is the end of his reign, and his downfall is almost complete, really. And the rest of the scenes that we see that downfall enacted are merely kind of just a necessary playing out of what has already been decided, really, there. So tragically, his inconsistencies, his overconfidence, his listening to his followers when they don't really have good advice, his poor decision about how he treated the goods and titles and lands of Gorn after he died, have all now contributed to the fact that his time as king is pretty well over.